Around 9:30 p.m. on the night of Thursday, August 21st, 1986, a roaring sound, muted like an approaching storm, arose near the area surrounding Lake Nyos in Cameroon's northwest region. In its aftermath, there was a strange, eerie silence. When dawn came, no cocks crowed to welcome the rising sun. No birds sang their pleasure at the steadily brightening day. No goats bleated their impatience to leave their pens. No cows lowed their anticipation for wide open fields. No dogs barked their excitement to greet their human companions. Roads, normally filled with people headed to farms, to the market, to check traps for game or trees for palm wine, were empty. No motorbikes roared across the hills, carrying people from one village to another. The few people who could be seen walked slowly, eyes glazed, mouths hanging open in breathless agony at the horror of the scene around them. And what a scene it was! Almost every living creature in the area lay on the ground, dead. What happened? In this episode of the Mythological Africans podcast, we'll discover how a tragic myth from the Kom people of Cameroon's northwest region might have recorded an earlier occurrence of such an incident. Hello, friends, and welcome to the Mythological Africans podcast, where we read and talk about stories from African mythology and folklore. I am your host, Helen Mbe. Cameroon is a West Central African country. It is my country of origin. It is also home to one of the African continent's active volcanic lines. The Cameroon volcanic line starts from the Lake Chad region in the north, cuts across the western edge of the country, and extends into the Atlantic Ocean. If you go in from the ocean, it is responsible for the islands of Annobon, Sao Tome and Principe, and Bioko. It is also responsible for Mount Cameroon, a still active volcano in the southwestern region, as well as several volcanic fields across both the south and northwestern regions of the country, many with crater lakes. Lake Nyos is a crater lake on the Oku volcanic field in the northwest region of Cameroon. A crater lake forms when water fills a mountain crater left behind by volcanic activity. In some cases, the explosion or collapse which forms the crater is the last of said volcanic activity, and the lake lives on as a tranquil memorial to more turbulent times. In other cases, the waters settle on the crater while volcanic activity continues below. All that burning releases gases like carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide. These gases dissolve into the lake and build in concentration at the bottom. When this happens, the water on top acts like a weak stopper on a bottle of Coca-Cola. Anything, a small earthquake, some volcanic activity at the bottom of the lake, or even heavy rainfall which pours fresh water into one end of the lake, can disturb this fragile balance. This causes the gases to rise to the surface. When this happens, because the gases are denser than the air outside, they act just like bubbles pouring out of a bottle of Coke which you just shook and opened. They pour down the sides. This is called a limnic eruption, and it is what happened that Thursday night in August. Something, and the experts are still not sure what it was, disturbed the balance of the lake. This released hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide that had built up at the bottom of the lake. The gas rose at a speed of about 100 kilometers an hour. That's an easy 60 miles or so an hour, before pouring down the side of the mountain. This death cloud was 50 meters thick, and it moved downslope at about 20 to 50 kilometers an hour. It spread over a radius of about 23 kilometers or 14 miles. The explosion and the outpour of gas was the roaring sound the people who survived the ordeal heard that night. This toxic cloud of carbon dioxide flowed like water into the surrounding area. When it was over, almost all living things, millions of insects, tens of thousands of birds, 3,500 livestock, and 1,746 people in the villages of Nyos, Kam, Cha, and Subum were dead. This is not the first time something like this happened in the area, however. On the 15th of August, 1984, just 2 years earlier, a disturbance in Lake Monun, another crater lake in the Oko volcanic field, triggered a limnic eruption which released carbon dioxide and killed 34 people. That incident went unexplained, with people even suspecting terrorism, until the Lake Nyos incident happened and invited international scrutiny and scientific investigations. But perhaps if people had paid closer attention to the folklore of the people in this area, they would have realized that this phenomenon of exploding lakes and mass casualties was not exactly a new thing. The myths of the people on Cameroon's volcanic line are rife with stories about testy mountain and lake deities with whom relationships must be carefully negotiated for the people to live in peace. The myths of the Kom and Oko people who live in the area often speak of exploding lakes. One myth in particular, the foundation legend of the Kom people, is of interest. The story starts with the Kom people living as guests of the Bamesi chief or Fon, a man called Takoko. It all seemed to be going well, but the Bamesi Fon was afraid that the Kom were becoming too plentiful and so too powerful. He devised a trick to reduce their numbers and diminish their power, and he suggested to Tangankole, the Fon of Kom, that they each should build a house and entice the young men inside. Then they would bar the doors and set the houses afire. Why do such a heinous thing? Well, the young men were showing signs of becoming too powerful and threatening their reigns as Fons. Tangankole, unfortunately, agreed to this arrangement. Both Fons built the houses as planned, but Takoko built his house with 2 doors, and so, while the fires raged, his men escaped while all the Kom men died. When Tangankole, the Fon of Kom, discovered how he had been played, he vowed revenge. He called his sister to him and told her that he would hang himself. But when he did, the Kom people were not to cut his body down or even go near it. Instead, they were to watch for the appearance of a python track that would lead them to their new home. The Kom people followed their Fon's instructions precisely. After he hung himself, his body fluids, it is said, dripped down and formed a lake. Maggots from the Fon's body fell into the lake and became fish. The people of Bamesi were delighted with the new lake and the new food source. They informed their Fon, who proclaimed a day when they would all go to the lake to catch the fish. When the day came, the Kom people watched the people of Bamesi assemble at the lakeside, but they stayed back. First, the Bamesi people went into the lake and caught fish for their Fon. Then, they went back to catch fish for themselves. But then something terrible happened. In the Kom account, the people say the lake exploded and then sank and disappeared, taking with it most of the Bamesi population. The Kom people watched from the hills, and not long after, the python trail appeared, just as Tangankole had said it would, and so they began their journey west to the area they now occupy. As scientists around the world try to make sense of the Lake Nyos disaster, Eugenia Shanklin, an American anthropologist, spent more than 2 years doing fieldwork in the Cameroon grassfields region. She collected and analyzed myths and folklore from the area and its surroundings. She noted the frequent occurrence of myths about bad waters and angry spirits associated with them, and these stories are dispersed around the northwest region because people in the area have a long history of mass migrations for various reasons. This story from the Com and another about an exploding lake from the Oku people caught her interest, and rightfully so. Now remember that both the Lake Nyos and the Lake Munun incidents happened in August. If you're familiar with Cameroon, you would know that August is the peak of the rainy season in Cameroon. You might also remember that fresh water from heavy rain pouring into one side of a crater lake with a buildup of carbon dioxide is one way to trigger a limnic eruption. And so Dr. Shanklin speculated that the Com story is an ancient legend documenting an earlier occurrence of a limnic eruption in the area. And here are some factors which support her claims. First, the story starts with the Fons building huts which they later burn, a feat which could only be possible in the dry season. Second, the lake forms and then explodes. Dr. Shanklin got to talk with the Com elders, who are the repositories of knowledge and tradition, and they revealed that in their story, the lake exploded before it sank. So they said the waters first rose from the lake and then fell back, killing the Bamesi people, and then both the lake and the people sank into the earth and were never seen again. Third, Dr. Shanklin took it a step further. She visited Bamesi village where the events were said to have occurred. Now, there is no lake in Bamesi village, but there is a swampy area that no one ever visited at the time, even though it was abundant in raffia palms. Now, raffia palms are the superstars of the grassfield region. They give a very delicious kind of palm wine, and their branches and leaves are used for just about everything. So it is significant that nobody ever goes to this swamp. And even though the land around the swamp is fertile, no one lived there. It is said that the people who settled there all died. In the region as well, and if I remember correctly, in the western direction that the Com people are said to have migrated away from, there are lineaments, which are geographical fault lines, which in symbolic language would easily be thought of as snake tracks. These stories are believed to be about 300 years old, so this means the region has had volcanic activity from as far back as that time and possibly before. There is more to explore here. Like, I found out while doing the reading for this that there are temperamental lake spirits which, very much like the angry spirits of the Virunga volcanoes which we talked about earlier this month, have an interesting habit of moving around from crater to crater. And there are myths from the Balinyonga, Awing, and Oku, and other parts of the northwest region in the area around the Oku volcanic field, which include lakes which appear and disappear. And so we'll stop here for tonight, but as usual, I have links in the episode notes to more on the topic. And if you love speculative fiction from the African continent, you definitely want to check out the episode notes today, because there is a short story there by Cameroonian author Nkiacha Temking, and it's titled Bad Lake. You already know what's up. Before we go, however, you will be pleased to know that these days, Lake Nyos is equipped with degassing infrastructure, which prevents such an incident from ever happening again. And to that I say thank goodness for science, which can, sometimes, speak the language needed to calm ill-tempered spirits.